The sliding doors whispered shut behind him, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. He hadn't been in the store more than a few minutes before it happened. A supervisor's voice cut sharply across the aisle. "Sir, you're not needed here no more. Please, leave." The words rang out like a dismissal, the kind meant for someone unimportant, someone easily replaced. Shoppers glanced up from their carts. Employees paused mid-task, eyes darting nervously between the man and the woman giving orders. He stood still, holding a box against his chest, every nerve on fire. He was dressed in a faded polo shirt, jeans that didn't quite fit, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. To the world, he looked like another temp worker. Nothing special, disposable. But what no one realized, not the supervisor, not the customers, not even the weary employees watching in silence, was that this man was their CEO, and within moments, the entire store would be shaken by the truth. Hours earlier, the store had been just waking up. Outside, the sky was a dull sheet of gray, but inside the massive Everbright superstore the air carried the sharp scent of floor polish mixed with burnt coffee drifting from a break room. Shopping carts rattled across the tiles, announcements crackled over the PA, and employees shuffled into their stations. Among them was a man everyone called Rick. He looked ordinary, a little awkward even, fumbling with boxes in the stockroom and moving as if he wasn't quite used to the job. That was the point. Beneath the disguise was Richard Hale, CEO of the billion-dollar retail chain. Disturbed by letters that had reached his office, anonymous cries about toxic managers, ignored complaints, and unfair practices, he had decided not to send investigators, not to run a survey, but to walk among his employees himself, to see the truth with his own eyes. He didn't have to wait long. "New guy," barked a tall supervisor with a crooked name badge that read Carl. "Don't just stand there. Grab those crates. Faster." Rick bent quickly, pretending to fumble with the weight of the boxes. Across from him, a younger worker with tape wrapped around his wrist lifted carefully, wincing. "Move it, Lewis." Carl snapped. "Injured or not, we don't pay you to stand around." Rick stole a glance at the young man's face, sweat already streaking his temple, his jaw clenched against pain. No offer of help came. No sympathy. Only the sting of humiliation in front of everyone. Rick stayed silent, watching, storing it away. Later, when he was assigned to check out, he met Marisol. She was in her early 30s, her dark hair tied back neatly, her uniform crisp despite looking worn with age. Her smile for customers was genuine, but the weight behind her eyes told another story. Between customers, she leaned slightly toward him and whispered, "Don't let them see you slow down. They'll write you up for anything. Trust me, I've had 3 warnings this month already." Rick frowned. Warnings? For what? For being late. She scanned items briskly, never pausing. "My bus broke down twice. I'm a single mom. Can't afford a car yet. But they don't care. To them, you're either on time or you're out." She gave another polite smile to the next shopper, masking the exhaustion that was etched across her face. Rick's chest tightened. Here she was, doing everything she could to survive, and yet every small stumble was treated like failure. As the hours passed, small cracks revealed themselves everywhere. A teenager named Darren asked for a break after standing for 5 hours, only to be told, "Breaks are a privilege, not a right." A customer tossed crumpled bills at Marisol, and instead of defending her, the supervisor muttered, "Just take it. Don't make a scene." In the stockroom, Carl berated Lewis again, calling him pathetic as the boy dropped another heavy box. Each moment was like a needle, individually sharp, but together unbearable. The following afternoon, the tension boiled higher. The store was busy, carts lined up down the aisle. Marisol's register jammed, receipts crumpling in the machine. She fiddled with it, cheeks flushed, while Carl stormed over. Again, he barked loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You're useless. Step aside. I'll get someone who knows what they are doing." Her lips parted, desperate. "I can fix it. Just give me a minute." "Step aside." Customers stared. Marisol's hands trembled as she moved back. Rick's jaw tightened. He wanted to step forward, to intervene, but the disguise held him back. Not yet. Not until he had seen enough. That night, in the cramped break room that smelled faintly of reheated noodles, Rick sat with Marisol and Lewis. Lewis rubbed his taped wrist, whispering, "Doctor told me to rest, but if I miss work, I'll lose rent money." Marisol nodded, voice low. "I've been applying for other jobs. Nothing yet. They know we're trapped here." Their words weighed on Rick. He knew numbers, profit margins, charts, and graphs. But none of those figures captured this, the quiet despair, the exhaustion that no paycheck seemed to ease. The breaking point came the next morning. Rick was stocking shelf when Carl appeared again, face flushed, jaw tight. "You!" He jabbed a finger into Rick's chest. "You're too slow. Customers are complaining. We don't have time for dead weight." Rick kept his head low, staying in character. I'm trying my best." "Not good enough. You're done here. Get out." The words echoed. A hush fell. Employees froze, watching. Marisol's hand hovered at her register, trembling. Lewis peeked around the corner, wide-eyed. Rick lowered the box to the ground, heart pounding. He had seen enough. Carl sneered. "Didn't you hear me? Leave. Now." Rick straightened. His voice, for the first time, was calm, steady, carrying an authority that didn't belong to a temp worker. "No," he said, "I'm not leaving. Not until everyone here knows the truth." Carl frowned. "What are you talking about?" Rick removed his cap. His shoulders straightened. His eyes sharpened. "My name isn't Rick," he said, every word crisp and deliberate. "It's Richard Hale. I'm the CEO of Everbright Superstores." The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled across the store. Customers craned their necks. Employees froze in disbelief. Marisol covered her mouth, eyes filling with tears. Lewis's jaw dropped. Carl staggered back. "Why are you joking?" Richard's voice cut through the air. "No. I came here undercover to see how this store was really being run. And what I've seen is unacceptable." The silence that followed was electric. Richard turned to Marisol. "You've shown grace under pressure. You worked tirelessly despite challenges no one should dismiss. Starting today, your record is cleared, and you'll be receiving a promotion." Her knees almost buckled. Tea spilled as she whispered, thank you so much." He faced Lewis next. "You should never be forced to risk your health for a paycheck. Effective immediately, we're revising our injury and sick leave policies." Lewis nodded, unable to speak, relief flooding his face. Finally, Richard's gaze locked on Carl. "As for you, you've humiliated, threatened, and mistreated employees. That ends today. You are relieved of your duties. Security will escort you out." The color drained from Carl's face as two guards appeared. His protest fell flat, drowned out by the murmur of shocked employees. He was led away, the authority stripped from him in an instant. Richard turned to everyone. His voice softened, but carried the weight of truth. "No company succeeds by crushing its people. We rise together, or we fall apart. Starting today, this store will change. And so will every store in this chain. Fair treatment, respect, real support." For the first time in years, hope seemed to bloom inside those walls. Employees clapped, some with tears on their cheeks. Marisol hugged Lewis, whispering, "It's finally over." But Richard knew it wasn't over. Not even close. That night, as he left the store, the parking lot quiet under flickering lamps, he felt something slip into his pocket. A folded note. He looked around. No one nearby. Under the glow of a streetlight, he opened it. The handwriting was hurried, desperate. "If you think this store is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Meet me tomorrow, alone, or more people will suffer." The paper trembled in his hands. He scanned the shadows of the lot, his pulse quickening. The story wasn't finished. It was only beginning. The parking lot was nearly empty. The faint buzz of a flickering street lamp was the only sound as Richard Hale stood alone, staring at the crumpled note in his hand. "If you think this store is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Meet me tomorrow, alone, or more people will suffer." The words chilled him. His instinct was to dismiss it as a prank, some disgruntled employee trying to stir up drama. But there was something in the handwriting, hurried, urgent, almost desperate, that made him pause. Whoever wrote it wasn't seeking attention. They were pleading. For the rest of the night, Richard barely slept. His mind kept circling back to the faces of Marisol, Lewis, and Darren. Good people trying to survive in a system that was supposed to lift them up, but instead pushed them down. If the note was real, if there was something darker festering inside his company, then he had to know. By dawn, his decision was made. The next evening, Richard arrived at the place the note had specified, a shabby diner on the edge of town, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the night. The inside smelled of grease and strong coffee. Only a handful of truckers and night workers sat scattered in booths. He slid into a corner booth, ordered black coffee, and waited. His disguise was different this time. Plain jacket, bowl cap, glasses. Nothing about him screamed CEO. 5 minutes passed. 10. Just as he began to wonder if he'd been set up, the door creaked open. A woman slipped inside, her hood pulled low. She glanced around nervously before spotting him. "Mr. Hale," she whispered, sliding into the booth. Richard's heart tightened. She couldn't have been more than 25. Her hands shook as she clutched a crumpled envelope. "Who are you?" he asked carefully. "My name's Jenna. I work nights at Store 42. I was there when Carl was transferred before he came to the store you visited." Her voice cracked. "He's not the only one." Richard leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Jenna pushed the envelope across the table. Inside were photocopies of disciplinary forms, time card records, and memos signed by middle managers. They told a story darker than anything Richard had imagined. Hours slashed without warning, employees forced to work off the clock, threats of termination of their reported injuries, and worse, patterns. It wasn't just Carl. It was multiple supervisors across multiple locations, all emboldened by the same toxic directives. "They say it comes from the top," Jenna whispered. "That corporate wants numbers no matter the cost. They call it the quiet cut, saving money by squeezing people until they quit. And if anyone complains, they make sure we disappear." Richard's blood ran cold. "Disappear." Jenna nodded, eyes wide. "One of my friends reported a manager for harassment. A week later, she was fired for stealing, something she never did. They blacklisted her. She can't get work anywhere." The diner felt suddenly smaller, the hum of the neon sign louder. Richard had built this company on values of fairness and family. Or so he thought. But somewhere, in the shadows of his empire, those values had been twisted into something cruel. Over the next week, Richard expanded his undercover investigation. He visited stores quietly, sometimes as a customer, sometimes slipping into the back as a transfer worker. What he found confirmed Jenna's story. At one location, an elderly janitor named Frank was told to skip his legally required breaks or risk losing hours. At another, a young immigrant woman worked double shift without overtime pay. Everywhere he went, the same culture of fear lingered, employees whispering in break rooms, managers tightening the leash, good people ground down until they had nothing left. One night, in the storage bay of Store 57, Richard overheard two managers talking. "Head office doesn't care how we do it," one said, "as long as the numbers look good." "Exactly. Push harder. If they can't handle it, there's a line of people out there who will." The words twisted in Richard's gut. These weren't rogue bullies like Carl. This was systemic, institutional, and if the rot went high enough, it meant people in his own corporate office had looked the other way, or worse, encouraged it. The breaking point came when Jenna called him again, her voice trembling. "They know I talked to you," she whispered. "My hours were cut this week. My manager keeps threatening me. I think they are trying to get rid of me." Richard's chest tightened. She had risked everything by coming forward. Now she was paying the price. "Stay strong," he told her firmly. "You're not alone. I promise you, this ends now." For Richard, it was no longer just about protecting his company's reputation. It was about justice. For Jenna, for Marisol, for Lewis, for every nameless worker who had suffered in silence. The next morning, he walked into headquarters, not as Rick the Temp, not as a disguised observer, but as Richard Hale, CEO of Everbright Superstores. His presence rippled through the glass holes like a storm rolling in. Executives shuffled nervously into the boardroom, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. They expected the usual quarterly briefing. They had no idea what was coming. Richard dropped the thick envelope Jenna had given him onto the glossy table. Photocopies spilled out across the wood. Memos, time cards, disciplinary forms. Evidence. This, Richard said, his voice steady but hard, is what our employees are living through. This is what our company has become. And it ends today. The room went still. A few executives exchanged worried glances. One man at the far end cleared his throat. With respect, Richard, those are isolated incidents. Stores have bad managers sometimes. No, Richard cut him off sharply. This isn't isolated. I've been there. I've seen it. And some of you sitting here knew. You let it happen. Murmurs spread, defensive voices rising, but Richard's next words silenced them. I went undercover. I was fired in front of customers. I saw injuries ignored, mothers humiliated, workers treated like date. Don't tell me it's isolated. I lived it. Gasps fluttered through the room. Some executives stared in disbelief, others paled visibly. Richard's gaze swept the table. From this moment forward, we are rebuilding, store by store, policy by policy. If you cannot stand behind that, you are free to leave, because I will not run a company that destroys lives. The reforms began that very week. Anonymous hotlines for employees were created. Supervisors under investigation were suspended. Overtime violations were addressed. For the first time in years, workers felt a glimmer of hope. But even as change stirred, Richard couldn't shake the weight of Jenna's warning. They make sure we disappear. One evening, as he reviewed reports in his office, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you can stop this? You have no idea how deep it goes. Attached was a single blurry photo, Jenna leaving her apartment, a shadowy figure following her. Richard's blood turned to ice. Whoever was behind this wasn't just protecting bad policies. They were willing to intimidate, even endanger, anyone who threatened their grip on power. The fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. The photo haunted him. Jenna leaving her apartment. A shadow following close behind. The text that came with it was even worse. You think you can stop this? You have no idea how deep it goes. Richard Hale, CEO of Everbright Superstores, sat frozen in his office, the glow of the desk lamp casting sharp shadows across the document spread before him. For weeks, he had been peeling back layers of corruption inside his company, unpaid overtime, threats, toxic managers. He thought he had found the source. He thought firing Carl, reforming policies, and confronting his board was enough. But now, staring at a blurry image on his phone, Richard realized the truth. Someone powerful wanted him to back down, and they weren't afraid to target whistleblowers to keep their grip on the company. He couldn't let that happen. Not to Jenna. Not to anyone. The next morning, Richard called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice shaky. They've been outside my place, watching. I don't know what to do. Jenna, Richard said firmly, you're not alone. I'm sending security to you now. You'll be protected, but I need you to trust me. This goes higher than we thought. There was silence, then a trembling whisper. It's a board, isn't it? Richard didn't answer directly, but his silence told her everything. 2 days later, the board meeting was called. It was supposed to be routine, financial updates, quarterly performance. Instead, Richard walked in carrying a leather binder stuffed with reports. He looked calm, but inside, his pulse hammered like a war drum. Around the table sat 12 of the company's most powerful figures, old friends, longtime allies, and some he had always quietly distrusted. Their suits were immaculate, their smiles practiced, but Richard knew at least some of them had blood on their hands. He placed the binder in the center of the table and slid it open. Inside were testimony from workers across multiple states, payroll records showing unpaid hours, confidential memos written by regional directors, explicitly instructing managers to trim staff through attrition and make turnover work in our favor. The room went still. One board member, a silver-haired man named Wallace, shifted in his chair. Richard, this is troubling. But surely you don't think the board sanctioned these practices? Richard cut him off. These weren't isolated. This was policy. It was called the quiet cut. And unless you want me to believe rogue managers invented the same scheme across 20 stores, I know it didn't stop at the regional level. Murmurs spread. A few board members exchanged guilty glances. Wallace leaned back, his jaw tightening. "You're playing a dangerous game, Richard." "No," Richard said coldly. "You are. You've taken the company I built on trust and turned it into a machine that feeds on its own people. I went undercover. I saw it. I lived it. And if you think I'll stay quiet, you don't know me." That was when Wallace smiled faintly. A predator's smile. "You think the public will thank you for destroying us? For tearing down Everbright? You will bone with the rest of us." Richard slammed his hand against the table. "I'm not here to destroy Everbright. I'm here to save it from people like you." Gasps broke out. One of the younger board members, pale and sweating, suddenly spoke up. "He's right. I've seen the emails." Wallace ordered cuts, told regional directors to push workers out. He said, and I quote, "cheaper to scare them off than fire them." The room exploded with voices, denials, accusations, demands. Wallace's face reddened as he shot to his feet. "You'll regret this, Hale. You will regret crossing me." Richard met his eyes without flinching. "No, the only people I regret crossing are the workers we failed." Within 48 hours, Richard's legal team and federal investigators were combing through Everbright's records. Whistleblowers came forward in droves. The press caught wind, and headlines erupted. "Retail giant rocked by Undercover CEO expose." Wallace and 3 other board members were removed, facing charges of labor violations and fraud. The company's stock trembled, but Richard didn't care. For the first time in years, the truth was being told. Marisol called him, crying tears of relief. Lewis sent a text that simply read, "Thank you." And Jenna, protected now by corporate security, finally felt safe enough to breathe. But victory didn't feel sweet. Not yet, because late one night, as Richard left the office, another envelope waited on the hood of his car. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed this time. "You expose Wallace." Good, but he wasn't the only one. There are more, much more, and they won't go down quietly. At the bottom, in neat letters, were 3 words that made his blood run cold. Trust no one. In business, corruption doesn't grow in the open. It festers in silence, in shadows, in whispers that workers are too afraid to share. Richard Hale thought he was saving one store. Instead, he uncovered a war for the soul of his entire company. He had started this journey to see the truth. Now the truth was staring back at him, darker and deeper than he could have imagined. And he knew one thing for certain. The fight was far from over. The city skyline glittered in the distance, but Richard Hale barely noticed it through the tinted glass of his office window. The letter still lay on his desk, its message etched into his mind like a scar. Trust no one. For weeks, he had been waging war inside his own company. He had fired toxic managers, exposed corrupt executives, and begun rebuilding trust with employees. But every victory uncovered a darker layer. Wallace, the board member he'd forced out, had only been one head of a hydra. Others remained, hidden, waiting. Richard knew he couldn't win this battle from behind a desk. If the rut ran through his company's core, then the only way to save Everbright was to cut it out completely, even if it meant burning everything he had built. The turning point came on a rain-slick night when Jenna, the young worker who had first warned him, called again. "They moved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was transferred to another store. The new manager, he told me if I keep talking, I'll never work in retail again. He said he has orders from higher up." Richard's grip on the phone tightened. "Did he say who?" "No names, but he laughed when I mentioned you. He said, CEOs come and go, but the machine never stops." Her words cut through him like a knife. The machine. That's what his company had become, an engine of profit that chewed up people and spat them out. Richard made a decision. Enough secrecy. Enough whispers. If they wanted to play in the shadows, he would drag them into the light. The next board meeting was unlike any before. Cameras were set up in the room. Reporters had been invited. Executives whispered nervously as they filed in, realizing this wasn't a private session. Richard stood at the head of the table, not in a tailored suit but in the same faded polo shirt he'd worn during his undercover shift. A deliberate choice. A reminder. "You all know why we're here," he began, his voice steady. "For too long, Everbright has hidden its sickness behind numbers and reports. But I've seen the truth. I work the shifts. I've heard the stories. And today, the world will hear them too." Gasps rippled around the table. Wallace's allies shifted uncomfortably. One woman hissed, "Richard, this is madness. You'll destroy us." Richard looked her in the eye. "No, you destroyed us the moment you decided profits mattered more than people." He pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind him lit up with testimonies, video recordings of employees across the country, Marisol, Lewis, Jenna, Frank the janitor. One by one, their stories filled the room. Tears, anger, betrayal. "This," Richard said, gesturing to the screen, "is Everbright. Not the balance sheets. Not the stock price. These people. And if that makes investors nervous, so be it." The climax came when he revealed the final piece of evidence. Internal emails traced back to 2 senior board members. Clear directives. Orders to cut hours illegally. Threats against whistleblowers. A deliberate plan to inflate profits at any human cost. The room erupted. Reporters firing questions. Executives shouting denials. Security moved in as the accused board members tried to storm out. Richard raised his voice above the chaos. "Effective immediately, you are removed from this company. Federal investigators are waiting outside these doors. You will answer for what you've done." For the first time, the machine shuddered. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Stock prices dipped. Headlines blazed. But something else happened too, something Richard hadn't seen in years. Hope. Workers across the country reported safer conditions. Overtime pay returned. Managers who had once ruled with fear were replaced by leaders who listened. Marisol received a promotion and finally bought a used car to make the commute easier. Lewis got the medical leave he needed to heal his wrist. Jenna, safe at last, became the first employee representative invited to corporate meetings. The company was smaller now, profits thinner, but Richard didn't care. For the first time in decades, Everbright felt alive. Yet even as he stood in a reformed store one evening, watching employees laugh together in the break room, Richard couldn't shake the weight of what he had seen. Because for every Everbright, there were other companies, other machines, other Wallaces, and he knew his fight wasn't over. "Power reveals who we are," Richard said in an interview months later. "I wore a disguise to see how people were treated when no one important was watching. What I found is that leadership isn't measured by profit or growth or prestige. Leadership is measured by how you treat the people with the least power. That's where the truth lives. And sometimes the truth is ugly." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "But if one CEO can change one company, maybe others can too. Maybe the machine doesn't have to win." The interview ended. The screen faded. And somewhere, in the shadows of another corporation, another worker was writing a letter. The kind of letter that starts revolutions.